Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Health Education England's webinar on student placement, expansion and innovation. We are absolutely delighted to have you. There's 235 people so far on the webinar and more arriving by the moment. And we're going to give you quite a high octane 30 minutes of update on the work done to date and what happens next. And what we need you to do is to really engage, think through. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to continue to engage in this work as it goes live. But today is going to be a real chance to get up to speed with everything that is going on. The allied health professions placement issue is incredibly important. We're obviously restarting post-COVID to really try and get placements back on track for 2021. But also we're looking at significant expansion this year in clearing. There'll be more spaces than ever. The government is funding and supporting the ability for us to put more students into placements this year. And onwards from there, the people plan growth will mean that we need more and more AHPs over time. So it has never been a more important time to work together across the system to expand placements and really understand the opportunity. And already we're seeing so many exciting things playing through. So today you're going to get some feedback on the Clever Together work that we have done together. The report will then follow. Some update on the work that David is leading around the technically enhanced and simulation-based placements, and the work that Ruth is leading around enabling us to really drive change in how we place students in the future and how we optimise the opportunity. I'm delighted that Suzanne Rastrick is lurking somewhere in cyberspace with us today. So Suzanne, thank you for your tireless support of AHPs and of the student agenda. It's hugely appreciated. And I just want to introduce a team to you. You've obviously got me, Beverley Harden, the Allied Health Professions lead within Health Education England. You have got Ruth Allarton, who is leading the programme for us around placement expansion. We have David Marsden, who's an HEE regional lead in the North East, who is leading the work for us around the simulation and technically enhanced placements. We have we've got Janice St John-Matthews and Char Hobbs, who have done all the work around the Clever Together work. And I'm just delighted. Char, it's her last day of student placement today with us. We've been together for 8 weeks. We've survived together, Char. It's been an incredible 8 weeks. Thank you for your fantastic contribution to HEE over this time, and delighted to do your final assessment this afternoon. And what a way to finish. Fantastic. I also want just to credit Sophie Gay and Austin Booth, who've worked tirelessly with us to help us with this agenda. And of course, Jane Gardner-Florence, without whom none of this would be possible, who's our fantastic comms lead, who's helping us through all of this work. So thank you, team. Quite an incredible piece of work. And I'm now going to hand over to Char to end her placement on a high. Over to you, Char.
Hi everyone, I'm Char. So just wait for the next slide to come up. But for the next 10 minutes, Janice and I will be talking you through the AHP placement online workshop and our findings that we explored from this. So next slide, please, Jane. Thank you. So this project was launched on the 23rd of June for 2 weeks. And the aims were to generate insight about how we can improve clinical placements for AHPs for the current and future students. We asked HEIs, AHPs, representative bodies and students and many more people about their thoughts and their experiences to bring the key interests together. We explored the most popular comments and ideas and also picked out the major themes from the crowdsourced data too. We've then tested this with the Council of Deans, 150 leaders, which Janice will explain at the end. So it's over to Janice now.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Char. So as Char said, the crowdsource hosted by Clever Together ran for 2 weeks, and in that 2 weeks we had 1,300 participants and we had over 8,500 contributions, whether that be comments or ideas. So quickly, just to share those demographics, before participants were able to join the discussion, they were asked to complete a short questionnaire to help us establish who was part of the conversation and to get the snapshot of their views around clinical placements. So the chart on the top left-hand side shows that the majority of those who engaged were pre-registration allied health professionals. We were absolutely delighted that we had students engage. We've also had those returning to practice. Our support work group, we had some non-registered healthcare professionals, our nursing and midwifery colleagues, and other people as well in the conversation. If you look to the top right hand side, we're absolutely delighted that every single AHP profession joined the conversation. As expected, the larger professions had more contributions, and that would be our physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and our radiography colleagues. We had our paramedic colleagues did contribute, but there's slightly less input from them, and we're delighted that we've had smaller professions such as our music therapy colleagues, our therapy and osteopaths responding. So on the bottom left hand corner, it's just a mix of exactly who was involved. As predicted, it was mostly placement providers and academics, but there's a broad spectrum of people engaging. And then on the bottom right hand side, it's just a litmus test of how everyone's feeling, whether there was a will and a want to increase placement capacity and support this agenda. And this came out as a resounding yes. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, as predicted, most of the participants came from England. It's a Health Education England hosted activity, but we were delighted to see contributions for the 4 countries. And actually the crowdsource was open to everybody internationally, and we had contributions across the world. And you can see that on the graphic on the right-hand side of your monitor. Next slide, please. So as Charles explained, we did very top level data analysis for this webinar today, especially with 8,500 contributions. We had 5 questions that were asked, and this slide represents the most voted for and most commented on activities. And I believe the slides will be available after the webinar, and I would encourage you to review these. I just wanted everyone to be aware of those 8,500 comments. Clever Together, myself, Char, Bev and Austin Booth, we've read every single comment, and I'm delighted that Char is now going to present the common themes that are presented from the information. So next slide, please, and over to Char.
Thank you, Janice. So the first theme is about diversity in placement opportunities. So there was a need for diversity across skills learned on placement, and many participants mentioned that leadership or role emerging placements can promote different skill sets from a traditional placement, like being on a ward, for example. Also, working interprofessionally with other AHPs on placement has proven quite popular, which can also build valuable competencies. There were also common ideas around using non-traditional providers like schools and gyms to add to the breadth of the placements. So also diversity on location of placements. This was to help break down geographical barriers and to allow students more of a choice around placements to promote remote style placements. There were also ideas around placement planning, which has ideas around using shift patterns, using all days of the year, and to rethink whether 1,000 hours of placement are actually necessary across the AHPs. And lastly, for this slide is about the individual's journey on placement. So understanding that students may have a preference for their placement, whether it's needs specific or profession specific, and we find it's important to hear the student's voice in the placement design process so they can help plan their career path. And next slide, please, Jane. Thank you. So the second theme is about improving the process in terms of placement capacity and coordination. So this addresses the ideas of improving coordination and collaboration of all parties when planning the placements. So this can include managing expectations, capacity and placement training for learners. So as well as this, there was also some popular ideas around streamlining and clearing placements in a central hub, which all HEIs could have access to, so then they could distribute students across the localities. There was also a focus on capacity, which has been explored, and the ideas favoured peer-assisted learning and interprofessional learning over the standard one-on-one model, which can help increase capacity too. To have these models in practice, funding would be required to be able to provide concrete evidence for the models to be used widely across providers on placement. placement providers also feel that the funding could be used for an incentive to educators for taking students, because they don't directly see the placement tariff, so they feel that if they had some incentive they'd be more willing to take students. But others also suggested that recognition for educators for having a student could be just as important. And there's also some more comments and ideas about further support for students is encouraged in managing stress, attrition, and further support for BAME students as well, which can be shared between the HEI and placement provider. Next slide, please. So the third theme is about using joined up systems. So this is to create central and national coordination to create standardised practices which involve multiple stakeholders, so that allocating placements can be done, and also to facilitate consistent paperwork across professions. So this would help to remove administrative barriers to some placements, which some clinicians believe to exist at the moment. It also includes ideas about having a systems approach to map all placement capacity, which can be supported by professional bodies, HEIs and organisations. And this can all be held centrally with access for all. Next slide, please. So theme 4 is about redesigning the approach of education and placement models in the hope to completely rethink this structure. There was thoughts around new routes into healthcare jobs, so this could be via apprenticeships, and also there were thoughts around having the student's final placement as possibly being their first workplace, so they've got some insight and experience into it. There was quite a few comments also around advising that placement as a term could be reframed as practice-based learning or a learning environment, so the students and educators can see it as a learning pathway. There were also some more ideas around using and supporting the return to practice individuals to help recruitment issues, and also using their experience to enhance the capacity to take on more students. There was quite a few comments as well around the preparation of students for placement, because at the moment it can be seen as quite an issue for some clinicians. So in order for some students to be better prepared for placement, there were some solutions around HEIs having simulation-based learning prior to placements, and handing over some clinical learning and basic procedures to the HEIs so the students are fully prepared. Next slide, please. So theme 5 is about educators' capacity. So it's about educators not having the sufficient capacity, especially when asked to have a student. So there were some solutions around having ring-fenced time to teach the students in order to give the student the best experience, with the educator having a smaller caseload, so that they can protect the learning time to enhance the student's learning and to also help the educator. There's also another solution around having a main placement facilitator or a student coordinator to allow a coordinated teaching approach, and also give the clinicians more time for their own development as well as developing the students' learning. So the placement facilitator or coordinator could also have the administrative tasks like having the IT access and the smart cards for all students prior to placements, because this can be a big current issue. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the last theme that we found is about placement cultures and attitudes, which was voted for and mentioned a number of times. So the ideas that we analysed suggested that there needs to be a positive mindset about having a student. Lots of contributors said that students are an integral part of the team and they should be accepted by all and supervised by all. So this could be via a whole team approach to allow the student to be valued, but also allowing all departments to take students and to understand that no area is too specialist to take a student. So this could be including the use of support workers to be encouraged to take students, because there were lots of comments around all bands can provide valuable experiences for students as well. Okay, next slide and over to Janice.
Thank you, Char. So we're very conscious that there was a group of us analysing this data, and with all qualitative data sets, it was important that we got some critical friends in, because we've got our own biases when we look at that data. So we decided for this piece of work, our critical friends would be students, because they have the lived experience of what a placement feels like and looks like. So we were very fortunate that the 150 leaders via the Council of Deans, they were able to pull a group together on Tuesday morning, and we were able to sense check those 6 themes and to see what the students' thoughts were on it. Absolutely delighted that most of the professions were also represented in that group, and anyone who could not attend was invited to send some written comments to us. So we discussed the major themes, their experience and views, and experiences that they have had. Next slide, please. So from a student point of view, the areas they felt very strongly was, in particular, was diversity and placement opportunities. They felt that they turned up to the university due to limited capacity. They had to go with what was ever given to them, and they prefer maybe an approach where they turned up and the opportunities of placements were moulded to their career aspirations, and maybe that they could set 3 personal goals, and then they could work, if there was enough capacity in the system, to pick and choose placements that met their needs as a profession, but equally their personal plans, whether that be 3 or 5 year career goals. And for those working in education, of course, that sits really nicely with our graduate outcome data that we work with. They were really keen to have the student coordinator role. It became quite apparent that's quite patchy. It's not in every organisation, and they felt that incentivising educators was a positive, but sometimes because they saw it as a negative, because they felt that it created a feeling of burden, because you were getting some finance to have them, that must mean it involved extra work. Next slide, please. And then there's this final slide. We just kept hearing echoes of possibly the repair project, and cultures and attitudes really came out strongly. Just things like the stereotypical view of what a student is. Often they'd be referred to as the student. And they felt really strongly about us using all of our workforce, assistant practitioners, support workforce, to assist in their placement learning. They felt that there was value in every single person that they work with in helping them in their educational goals. So next slide, please. And I'm passing over to David now. Thank you.
Next slide, please, Jane. Good morning, everyone. This is where we offer you some resources to support your endeavours in expanding AHP placement capacity, all of which have been informed by the Clever Together work, which you contributed to. So this is a you said we did section, really. I'm going to cover this placement expansion webinar series in terms of retrospective things we've done, learning exchange and repository, and the HEE staff placement resource. Next slide, Jane, please. So starting with what we've already delivered, I think many of you will have probably experienced our rapid approach to the AHP placement expansion webinars. We did them because we wanted to inspire confidence in expanding AHP placements immediately through national examples, because we knew some people were already doing things like text placements and simulation to get students through their 3rd year, or to resolve some of the issues in the backlog for 2nd year students, and also to support the submission of clinical placement expansion bids, which are busy being looked at now. You can access all the webinar recording links, and that's a live link I've put on the screen, and the presentations will be shared. So as you can see, we delivered 4 webinars, a 3-hour one on text and simulated placements where over 600 people attended. That was really successful, and we saw some of the language reflected in the CPEP bids, which is really good. And also we covered alternative supervision models, role emerging placements, and on-site clinics, all of which were touched upon in the Clever Together work. So next slide, please, Jen. So first of all, I'm delighted to launch our AHP Placements Learning Exchange. So what Clever Together showed us that there's lots of great stuff going on there, out there, lots of interesting and diverse views. So we've created a learning exchange. So the 2 elements of the learning exchange are a discussion forum, where people can share ideas, share policy, guidance, share best practice, and also where people can seek support and collaborate around capacity or quality challenges in relation to placements. And there's also a section where people can store information. So any best practice examples or any guidance that comes out, that can be stored on the Learning Exchange, and it can be searchable by the types of placement. Next slide, please, Jane. So firstly, what you need to do if you want to access the AHP Learning Exchange is to sign up to NHS Futures platform, which many of you will be familiar with through the Chief AHP network and the hub. And secondly, there's a link there to actually access the Learning Exchange, so you can go directly to it. Next slide, please, Jane. So this slide just shows you what the Learning Exchange looks like. It's pretty simple. So you can, top left, you can post to the discussion forum, or top right, you can access a discussion forum and search it. Bottom left, you can add to the resource library, and that's really simple. You just click on the cloud with the arrow, and it's really self-explanatory. You just put a title in, you've got a summary section, and you can upload a document if you want to. And bottom right, you can access the resource library, and you can then search based on the 7 different types of placement we've identified, so role emerging placements, on-site clinics, etc. And also there's a section for reports. So for example, when Ruth Allarton's finished her placement report, that will be in there to inform everybody in terms of what professional bodies, regulators say, etc. Next slide, please, Jen. So finally, the other update is many of you might recognize this. If you don't, it's well worth accessing. The link is underlined in blue. The HE Star is the official HE repository for transformation, and it's split down into our key mandate areas, supply, upskilling, etc. And you can click on any one of those elements to search best practice examples and resources in HEE. So what we've done to support this and make sure placements are searchable through this, we're developing a specific document with the AHP placement definitions and some gold standard examples and any guidance that's in existence. So services that are looking in terms of for service development transformation in relation to placements, they'll be able to find it there. And that's all for me. I'll hand over to, sorry, next slide, just to say that they're my contact details, and if anybody wants to ask any questions, you can contact me there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I'm just going to talk about the work that I've been doing. Can I have the next slide, please? Which is around talking with our regulators and our professional bodies about what their expectations are in relation to placement, so that we all understand what the rules of the game are and how we're working together and what we can do in terms of making change. As we know, our regulators are very flexible in their approach. And at the moment, the professional bodies are absolutely working with us to try and make sure that students can progress and complete their studies, and supporting HEIs and students to do that. I think the one thing I do want to just stress here is that it's the 1,000 hours that is generally talked about is not a standard that applies to all of the professions. So it's just worth noting that we want to try and understand those kind of things that lie behind. Next slide, please. The next thing that we've been working on is with the placement expansion bids. We will be looking at how we maximise the learning from these. So we will look at organising clusters and support them with champions, and we will, using a QI methodology, evaluate findings and disseminate as we go. And we will do that through the learning exchange that David talked about. And it really is important that we collect as many examples of the good things that you're doing out there as possible, so that we can share them. And I keep saying, I think, just remember that one person's norm is another person's innovation. So something that you've been doing for ages that you take for granted may still be innovation to another profession or another organisation. So please share. And I'll hand over to Bev to round things up.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Ruth. That is marvellous. So gosh, that 25 minutes, everybody, quite incredible, quite incredible. There's been quite a few questions through the chat box. What I'll do is I'm just going to give you a bit of an update on the Accelerator Placement Fund, which I imagine many people are very excitedly waiting to hear about. And then I'm just going to try and answer through one or two of the questions that are popping up. And we'll make sure that we address all of those over the next few weeks and months. There'll be more webinars and we'll go into various topics in a bit more detail so that you're then able to engage with the bits that really matter to you. So the Accelerator Fund at the moment, we had about £6.5 million worth of bids in from the sector, which is absolutely outstanding. Incredible, thank you. Blew the budget somewhat. So at the moment we are working through those bids to really work out how can we support as many as we possibly can of that alongside our nursing and midwifery and dental health professional colleagues. So we're absolutely in that space at the moment. So it is taking us a bit of time to sift through the vast number, and all credit to everybody. Amazing quality of bid come in and some really exciting innovation. So we're working through them, as I say, as a way of trying to make sure we support absolutely as many as possible. So don't give up hope, stay with us and we'll work it through. And even if we can't do it at the moment, there may be other funding sources coming through that we can. So we'll come back to you with a plan around how we do that. We're taking a paper to our executive team next week to talk through the bids, the next steps, so that we really are in a position to move as we move into August. So please don't expect to hear from us until at least the middle of August, whilst we get these pieces of work done and into the second phase of August potentially. So stick with us. I know you're all chomping at the bit, but please give people the chance just to make sure we're making the right decisions in the right way. So questions that have come through from the chat box. I have to say, Char, several people saying fantastic presentation. So well done. Absolutely kicked your placement out of the park, I have to say, Char. Thank you. A lot of conversation about coaching models, the CLIP approach to placements, etc. Just to know that Ruth has got all of these things in her sights. And again, what we will do as we start to build the team around this work is to enable there to be the right level of attention paid to both, as Ruth said, the innovation, which is innovation for many, but also the highly established pieces of work that we need to spread at pace across our various different professions. So really we'll make sure that those pieces of work are all drawn together. And it really will be that coaching approach that is going to transform, I think, the whole approach to the student, personalised journeys through training, and our ability to exercise the skills we should be demonstrating now with the populations we serve, with the students that we are supporting too. So we hopefully live that as we move. Some questions about we talked earlier about that some of the universities might take on some of those earlier skills. Very, very early days to really understand how we think about the split between what is appropriate to learn in a simulated or text environment, what's appropriate to learn in a clinical placement. I know speech therapy has done a huge amount of work thinking through where the different skills are best learned. And there's some really interesting emerging literature around the improved skill acquisition for some quite difficult techniques and behaviours actually in the safer environment of simulation. So I think there's a bit about how we suspend perhaps some of our established thought in this space and stay open to understanding how we move forwards. And as Ruth says, how we evaluate as we go to make sure that we are building the evidence base as well as utilising the evidence base. Comments from our colleagues in music therapy and arts and drama therapy and also my osteopathic colleagues about the challenges to them not being covered by the placement tariff. And please, I know we have discussed this, that I absolutely appreciate the challenge of that. And what we're working to try and do is to make sure the interventions we are putting in place are as inclusive as possible, understanding that the Learning Support Fund is a governmental policy that we will then need to work with and through that, we need to do in the right way. So all those pieces of work are forming part of our much bigger piece of work around placement capacity. I think we're now bang on the 10:30. There will be other questions that have come through. We'll work to try and answer those and ensure that they're pulled into the work that we're doing. I just want to finish by thanking all of you for the incredible work you are doing. The way that you have shown absolutely the equal value to our future supply line as to our current workforce, and everything that you are doing to put student placements front and centre as you restart your services. David and I were reflecting this morning on the journey we've all been through over the last 5 months of, bringing back staff, worrying about our student deployment, trying to run services, trying to restart, close down. It's been an incredible journey the last 5 months. The fact that you join us today, the energy is around how we support our next generation of students is absolutely laudable. We're very proud to be an AHP. So thank you. Thank you, Suzanne, for spending your time with us this morning to support us in these endeavours, and keep at it. Keep putting students front and centre. We'll let you know about the bids as soon as we possibly can, and we will continue in this space. So please keep with us on this journey. And those of you who are passionate about this journey with information to share, please use David's resources he's put forward there. Share the information to make sure we're not leaving any stone unturned as we try and maximise the opportunities here for the AHP profession, but most importantly for the populations we serve. Every single one of these AHPs we're crafting is needed desperately by the populations that we serve. So what better endeavour could we wish for? Thank you for your time. Have a good day, everybody, and good luck. Bye-bye.